Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at 8 different mistakes in English. I'm going to show you a sentence with a mistake. You think about it, see if you can work out the mistake, and then I'm going to explain it to you so in the future you won't make it again. So if you want to reduce the amount of mistakes that you make in English, then this video is for you. My name is Archie. Thank you very much for joining me on this channel. Do subscribe below if you want more content to keep improving your English. Also, if you want a free PDF with all of the sentences that we're going to look at today, then go down to the description, you can click a link and download it there. So here is our first mistake. Look at the sentence and decide how can we change it. So this is a really difficult one because this verb, suggest, is quite complicated. It's a little bit different to other verbs in English. So we cannot say, I suggested her. We can use this form with other verbs like I gave her, I told her, I taught her, etc. However, with suggested, it's different. So I'll show you the first way we can write this sentence. We can say, I suggested buying the blue one. So when we use suggest and we follow it with a verb, we always put that verb in the gerund. The gerund is that ing form. So let me give you a couple more examples. I suggested going to the cinema. I suggest ordering this dish. Every time, ing, that gerund form. But there's one other way we can form a sentence with suggest, so let me show you that. We can also make the sentence like this. If we want to really put in our pronoun, she, he, you, and we want to specify who we're talking to, then we could do that. I suggest that she buys the blue one. Or, we don't need to have that as well. We can, and we don't have to. I suggest she buys the blue one, and it's the same. One other thing to note about this sentence is that here we've got she buys. However, it's also possible in this sentence to say she buy, which is weird. This is because this sentence is subjunctive. Now, subjunctive is not something we use often in English. It's more common in Italian, French, and some other languages. In English, it doesn't exist very often. However, it does in this sentence. But in the UK, we usually don't use it. In the UK, we'll usually say buys. But in the USA, it's more common to use the subjunctive in this sentence, and you're more likely to hear buy. But both are correct, so it doesn't matter. Let me give you a couple more examples of the same structure. So here's one more example. I suggest that you go to the cinema. Or, without that, I suggest you go to the cinema. Now, one thing to note here is that if we're using the subjunctive like Americans, or if we're using the normal form like the British, then for you, it's exactly the same. There's no difference, so either way, it will always be the same. But if we use she, then a British person will say she goes, or he goes. But an American will say she go and he go. When it comes to we is just like you. It doesn't change. It's the same in the subjunctive and it's the same in the normal form. So either way, it doesn't matter. So if you want to be more British, then you can put the she goes and he goes just like you would in a normal sentence, and you can forget all of that. So, let's go to our next mistake. See if you can work it out. I suggest you to speak to him. Have a think about it. So just like the last one, we cannot form the sentence in this way, But there are two ways we can, which are: I suggest speaking to him with our gerund. I suggest that you speak to him. Or, I suggest you speak to him. Notice that this sentence is almost the same as this one. We just don't have that to there. So let's move on to our next mistake. So here's our next sentence. I'll give you a moment. So here our issue is with the S here. We don't want to say 2 litres bottle. We want to say this is a 2 litre bottle. Like this. This is a 2 litre bottle. Now the reason we do this is because here this word is an adjective. It's describing the bottle. So our noun in this sentence is this bottle. And then here, this word just describes the bottle. And when it's used as an adjective, then we won't put an S. Now here I have a jar of Marmite, or yeast extract, which is the same. Marmite is a very popular food that we can have with breakfast, and we can put it on toast. Now, this jar is 225 grams. So I say that with an S, because it's a noun. So this jar is 225 grams, with an S. But if I change this sentence and turn that into an adjective, we can say, this is a 225 gram jar. Let me give you a few more examples. So, here I've written nouns on the left and adjectives on the right. This bottle holds 1.5 litres with an S. This is a 1.5 litre bottle. So here 1.5 litre operates as an adjective. This note is worth £5. I have a £5 note. So this describes the note. It could be a £10 note, a £20 note, a £2 coin. We are going away for 3 days. It's a 3-day trip. One other thing to notice is that when we have adjectives like this, we usually put this little mark between them, a hyphen. I missed one here. So this mark is called a hyphen. Sometimes maybe you hear it called a dash, but when we use it to connect words we call it a hyphen. And we use that because these words are connected. They're both talking about the same thing about the bottle, 1.5 litre. So they're connected, so we can connect them with a hyphen. But that's just a really, really, really little thing. Let's go to our next mistake. So how do we make it correct? We take away our S, and we put our hyphens. I have a 5-month-old baby. So let's go to our next mistake. Can you give me any advices? What's wrong with this sentence? So again, we don't want the S in this sentence. We should say, can you give me any advice? Now this is because advice is one of those uncountable nouns. Sometimes we call them uncountable, sometimes non-count, or sometimes mass. And these are 3 words for the same thing. So advice is an uncountable noun. That means we can never put an S on the word advice. We can put an S on the verb though. So advises, we can put an S on that. But the noun advice, we never put an S on. Now this is because when we think of advice, we don't think of it as things we can count. We don't think of it as separate things, we think of it as one thing. Some advice, a lot of advice. So it's like it can be small or it can be big, but it cannot be divided. Let me show you some other uncountable nouns. So here are 9 common uncountable nouns. So none of these we can put an S on. If you see any of these words ever with an S, there are 3 possible reasons. Number 1 is because it's wrong, it's a mistake. Number 2 is because the word is used as a verb. Some of them can be verbs, like milk, she milks the cow. Water, he waters the plants. Or evidence, this evidences his crime. Or, number 3, some uncountable nouns can sometimes be countable. So there is a little flexibility depending on the situation. Like coffee and water. So if I say to someone in a bar or in a restaurant, "Can we have 2 waters, please?" then that is possible. And it means, if I say, "Can I have 2 waters, please?" it means 2 glasses of water. Because we're a bit lazy and we speed things up, we just drop the glasses of and put an S on the end. 2 waters, please. And you can do the same with coffee or beer. Maybe with milk you could do it, but it might be a little strange to ask for 2 milks or 3 milks at the pub or at the restaurant. I want to teach you everything, so there's one other thing I want to say, which is, if we do really want to count one of these things, there is a way. We can also use these phrases here, and there are many other phrases. A piece of and a bit of are very commonly used. I have a piece of furniture in my apartment. I only have 2 pieces of furniture in my apartment. So these ones, we can put an S on the end. We can make them plural, but we can't make these ones plural. I only have 3 bits of luggage. Can I have just a bit of milk? Do you have a glass of water? So let's go on to our next mistake. So again here, what's the mistake? So here, the same mistake. Content is an uncountable noun. I really love her YouTube content. Now, content is one of those uncountable nouns that can be countable and it can be uncountable. So I'll show you the only 2 times that it's used as a countable noun. So the first time we use the word contents with an S is when we're talking about the page at the beginning of a book which lists all the different topics or chapters of the book and what page we can find them on. You might also sometimes have an index, like in a dictionary, which is at the back, and that goes into much more detail and lists everything word by word in alphabetical order. But the contents is just much shorter and it's at the front. So that's the contents or the contents page. The only other time we use contents with an S is when we're talking about the physical contents of a container. Here's a box. What are the contents of the box? Those are the contents of the box. So here we can use contents. But if you're talking about content which is not physical, like the YouTube channel's content, or the content of a presentation or lecture, or the content of a film, then we always keep it without an S. Let's look at our next mistake. So have a look. What do you think? So here we've used the wrong verb. So we have 2 verbs, borrow and lend. Now the easiest way to remember this is when we lend something, we give it for a period of time. And when we borrow something, we take it for a period of time. Here we want to say, can you lend me your book? Or can you give me your book? Let me show you. So we have two ways we could say the same question. Can you lend me your book? Or can I borrow your book? So when you write these words, think, is it like take or is it like give? And then you can work out which word to use. Let's have the next mistake. So this is our final sentence. What's wrong? Again, we've used the wrong verb. We need to use lend. I'll lend you my book. I'll lend you my book. I'll give you my book for a period of time. Now, can you think how we can rephrase this sentence if we want to use the verb borrow? You can borrow my book. Now, if you want that PDF with all of the sentences and corrections, click the link in the description and I will email it to you. And if you want to practice any of the words and phrases that we've had today, do so in the comments. Now, thank you very much everyone. I hope you learned something today. Do subscribe if you want to keep improving your English, and I will see you again soon. Bye!